When I say October 7th, what do you see in your mind? And the question is, in 100 years, when we say the words October 7th, what will people say in their minds? As an example, after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Americans saw Pearl Harbor as the very symbol of World War II. But when I say World War II to you, what do you think of? D-Day, Normandy, the United States victory over the Nazis, or the beginning of a period of enormous growth for the United States, democracies, and freedom throughout the world? What is the key to that change in memory? It is the lessons that were learned from World War II that shape our understanding today. The question is, what are our memories of October 7th, 2023, and what lessons will we learn for the future? Thank you for joining me on this special edition of the True East podcast, in which we go back to October 7th, memorialize those who fought and fell, pray for the hostages, may they return soon, and honor those who are defending our country in this very day. October 7th is a deeply personal event in war for the people of Israel. For me, October 7th is not just an event, even though I was there on the morning of October 8th, already in the Southern Front and in the Army on October 7th. For me, October 7th brings up three names: Yonadav Levenstein, Ari Zentelman, and Yakir Teitelbaum. These are all people that I know, and I'm just one person in my own neighborhood. Yonadav was a young man. He got married 3 months before the October 7th massacre. He was a tall, striking, we called him the Viking, young Jewish man. He got married to a beautiful woman. I knew him from my work in the city of David. And I will never forget the day when we saw the ambulance and the fire truck heading down the street in our neighborhood. No one knew what house they were going to stop at, but they stopped at the home of the Levensteins, who lived across the street from us, and delivered the news that Yonadav, who was clearing out a Hamas tunnel, was attacked by a Hamas gunman, actually from behind him, and he was killed. We went to the funeral, and imagine a young bride of just a few weeks sitting on that grave, rubbing the dirt with her hands, crying over her loved one. That, for me, Yonadav Levenstein, and for my family, is one of the symbols of October 7th. The other is Ari Zentelman. We were on vacation by this time, taking a break from the war in a lot in southern Israel, when my wife Sarah came up to me crying, and she said, Ari Zentelman fell in battle. Ari Zentelman was such an incredible person. He was a father of young children, including a baby. He was a working man, young father, brilliant husband. He was asking for his wife to bring him the Gemara so that he could learn the Talmud in Gaza, and he fell while battling. I see his face in my mind right now. And we all watched when the army delivered a box of his valuables, the letters that he left behind to his wife and to his children. And finally, Yakir Teitelbaum, the son of very, very dear friends of ours, Yehuda and Marcy Teitelbaum, a true warrior, a lion. I knew Yehuda because he came on my boat in Michigan, along with his brother Meir, and I watched them going over the waves in a tube at this young 14-year-old boy who didn't necessarily look like he had any plans for the future. And to see him grow up into a warrior for Israel, commanding one of the leading tanks, going into Gaza and scouting for that tank so they could near and come close to a Hamas stronghold. He came out of the hatch to protect his tank when a sniper shot and killed him. The writings that this young man left behind, and I encourage you to go online, are mottos today that fill the streets of Israel to show the power of a young Israeli called to duty, a person of such morality and depth. This, for me, are my three people. You have your people. Could be Eli Sharabi, the hostage who was released, the Bibas family, people you know, people that are fighting. For all of us, October 7th is a deeply, deeply personal experience. But what is for sure is that this war has changed the way that we view Israel. What this brought to Israel was an entire shift in a new generation. We have to understand what this means. I'll give you one example. A young religious girl that I know, who normally would be going to national service, which is a replacement for the army, working with children who are disabled, or teaching, or working with children of cancer, she recently came up to me and said, I'm going to join the Israeli border police. I looked at this young woman. I mean, she looks like a strong wind could blow her right over. But she said, no, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to defend our country. I want to be on the battlefront, protecting Jerusalem, protecting our major cities. This idea of being called to duty is what is filling the streets of Israel. Even a poll that came out today, keep in mind, 2 years after fighting a war, the vast majority of the Israeli population, according to the INSS poll, still supports and believes in the Israeli Defense Forces. This is not Vietnam. This is not the Korean War. This is a war being fought on our borders. And while parts of the world may be chanting genocide, we know 7.5, 8 million people in Israel know not only is there no genocide, this is a war in which we are defending ourselves. And that has completely filled our families, our schools. Even the ultra-Orthodox are enlisting in the new Hasmonean Brigade. This is a new world. New businesses have come up. A friend of mine that I recently met with, who had a small business, said when the war began, he went immediately into reserve duty. He went into his unit and he realized there weren't enough drones, aerial drones for his unit. So the first moment when he was released, he created a drone company. Today, he and other people from reserves have a flourishing new business manufacturing drones inside of Israel. This is one of millions of businesses that people are popping up around the needs of our country. Some people have lost their jobs and they're coming up with new jobs. Focused on the war, this is a generation, again, as we say, the TikTok generation of Israel became Israel's iron wall. The question is, again, how are we going to carry these memories into the future? If we look back at Ben-Gurion, and I've talked about this before, Ben-Gurion had 3 essential principles of war. This happened when Ben-Gurion, in between the first half of the Independence War and the second half, Ben-Gurion took time. He began to read military doctrine. This young Jew from Russia and the other young Jews around him didn't know anything about military doctrine. They came to Israel to defend their country. He began to learn military doctrine, and he came up with 3 principles that form the state of Israel. The first is the necessity to preempt. Strike your enemy before he strikes you, not as a matter of being aggressive. There's no territorial ambitions. Judaism is not imperialistic. We haven't converted millions or billions of people around the world like Muslims have, and in fact, much of Christianity did. Judaism is not imperialistic by nature, but if you see your enemy coming, there's a command in the Torah and it says, stand up and kill him first. Rise and kill him first. That is called preemption. The second is to not allow the war to reach Israel. Fight the war on your borders or in your enemy's territory. And this is for one very simple reason. The entire state of Israel is the size of New Jersey. As we could see, the wave of the attack on October 7th that came into Israel was already, when I drove south on October 8th and past Tel Aviv to get to the Gaza borders around 45 minutes away, there was an ambulance that passed me in the opposite direction with police cars behind it carrying terrorists that had taken over an ambulance. It's a 45-minute drive to Tel Aviv, an hour drive to Jerusalem. Israel cannot absorb attacks. The first principle is to preempt. The second principle is you carry out the war on the enemy's territory. And the third, which brings us to our day, and perhaps the most essential element of how we are going to remember October 7th, is Ben-Gurion's final point of definitive victory. Don't stop halfway. Finish the job so that it does not repeat itself. That is the key that Ben-Gurion laid down to guide the Jewish people to having a state of Israel that is going to survive. October 7th reminded all of us of the necessity of these 3 points. The first 2 are obvious. The third is yet to be decided. Israel did not preempt. Israel did not preempt Hamas, and this will be studied and carried out for many years to come. Why did Israel not preempt Hamas? We saw Hamas training. We even intercepted their Jericho plan a year in advance, explaining what was going to happen, what the Hamas and the Palestinian terrorist regimes were planning. We had the actual plan. We understood that they disappeared and went underground. We lost their cellular signals and saw a bunch of new SIM cards being activated. The young women on the border were reporting suspicious activity. What was the problem? It boils down to one thing. And Ben-Gurion knew this. What does it mean to preempt your enemy? It means to know not only what your enemy is doing, to know what your enemy is thinking. And before he carries that out to preempt, Israel saw what our enemies were doing, but we did not understand what they were thinking. We ignored the signs of what Hamas was out to do. Hamas exists to destroy the state of Israel, eliminate world Jewry, and create a caliphate with its center in Jerusalem. It's in their charter. It's what they say they want to do, and it is what they tried to do, just like Hitler wrote Mein Kampf and laid out his plan. And people, oh, that's just a book he wrote. No, that's what Hitler wanted to do. That's what he tried to do. And 6 million people paid the price. Hamas has said time and again they are here to eliminate the state of Israel. But Israelis living in ivory towers, a lot of military generals that have been educated in Harvard and on ideas of U.S. containment, where your enemy doesn't really want to attack you. He wants to gain power by exhibiting power. Didn't believe this. We were not inside the minds of Hamas. We saw what they were doing, but we didn't take it seriously because we didn't know what they were thinking. That is called in Hebrew the conceptia, or the conception, the concept that we are living in our own bubble while the enemy is planning something and we refuse to see the signs. My book, When the Stones Speak, my New York Times best-selling book, which became a bestseller because people are interested in this. I talk about not the military conceptia. I talk about the psychological, the religious conceptia. For decades and decades, generations, Hamas educated an entire generation, and so did the Palestinian Authority, of young Arabs living in Judea and Samaria and in Gaza and throughout the Middle East. Something very simple. The Jews you see today, people like me, people like some of you, or people in your classes, those aren't the Jews of the Bible. These aren't the ancient Israelites. In fact, they have no connection whatsoever to the ancient Israelites that were here. And by the way, all that archaeology, that's just the Zionist plot. Who was here first? Muhammad was here first. And on the Temple Mount and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Ikrim as-Sabri, the Mufti, says week after week, there never was any Jewish temple in this location. There was a mosque, there is a mosque, and there will be a mosque. They erased Jewish history. They erased Jewish history at every moment. Even Arafat told President Clinton that the temple was in Yemen, at which point President Clinton said, are you saying there was no temple? That means there was no Judaism? That means there was no Christianity. And he threatened to get up and leave until Arafat retracted his words. Why were they erasing our history? Why were they trying to prevent the archaeology in the city of David? For one reason. Islam cannot handle a counterclaim, certainly one that predates it by thousands of years, that has the archaeological proof, like the Pilgrimage Road, like the clay seals that have been found in the city of David with names in Hebrew from people in the Bible, from the book of Jeremiah, which predate Muhammad by 1,200 years. They can't handle an alternative narrative over Israel or over Jerusalem. One answer, erase. When someone comes to erase your narrative, the next step is they are coming to erase you. The conceptia was, not only do we not understand their military goals, we did not and were not willing to accept that they truly raised a generation that eliminated our identity so that they would be prepared and willing to come and carry out some of the most brutal massacres against our people. This was the conceptia, and this is what we learned. And this is what Ben-Gurion knew when he said, you need to preempt your enemy. Know thy enemy. This is one of the major examples. Preempt and do not allow the war on Israeli territory. Both of these were violated on October 7th, and both of these will be studied for the future. However, it truly is Ben-Gurion's last point that is going to determine, in my mind, how we will look back in 100 years at October 7th. What will they say in 2125? 100 years from now, what will say happened on October 7, 2023? And that is Ben-Gurion's last point, that you must have a definitive victory over your enemies so that this does not happen again. Now, we need to talk about who is going to run Gaza after the war. Well, there's a deal on the table, and the deal makes a lot of sense for one reason. Our hearts are broken over our hostages. The Jewish people love our people so deeply. Every country perhaps loves their people. However, in Israel, we're really a family. You walk down the street, you bump into someone, it's their cousin, it's their brother, it's their son, it's their best friend. I was literally just sitting this morning, I had a nail on my tire and was having my tire fixed, and the person sitting next to me was explaining to me that his son's wedding happened on the day that his best friend and his best man was killed. And instead of his best friend being a witness under his chuppah, his best friend was buried on that day. That was my experience today getting my tire fixed. We're such a small people and such a family. Israelis and Jews, we feel these people so deeply that we want to bring them home. And I won't call that blindness. I'll call it a decision. That is why we're willing to entertain the deal. But the deal, let's look at this deal. And if we want to find out what's wrong with the deal being put forth by President Trump in great will and being supported by Prime Minister Netanyahu wholeheartedly with his heart because he wants these people to come home. If we want to know what's wrong with this deal, we need to look to see at what Hamas is willing to accept about this deal. Because in order not to fall into another concepcia, we have got to know. We have got to know what Hamas is thinking. Hamas is not thinking today about building universities in Gaza, about reforming, about sitting on boards of corporations and building skyscrapers and high-tech industry in Gaza and turning it into Tel Aviv or Singapore. Hamas is still thinking what they've always thought, that they want to eliminate the Jewish people and create a caliphate. So if they are willing to accept parts of this deal, that's what we will find is certainly wrong with this deal. Let's look at one of the paragraphs of the deal that puts forth. While Gaza redevelopment advances, and when the Palestinian Authority reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination. What is the bottom line here? The clause ties the future of the Gazan people and Palestinian self-rule to reforming the Palestinian Authority. Now, the Palestinian Authority is basically Hamas delayed by 3 months. They support the Fatah Tanzim terror arm, which up until October 7th had killed more Jews than Hamas had. They're run by Mahmoud Abbas, who people put forth as the future leader of the Gaza Strip, who, as I've spoken about and as I discuss in detail in my book, wrote his dissertation on the secret alliance between the Israeli Jews and the Nazis. The premise of his doctorate is that the Zionists wanted the Nazis to commit genocide and a Holocaust against Jews in Europe in order to create favor for a Jewish state. Now, if any of you believe this, please call your local practitioner, your local psychologist or psychiatrist, and immediately enlist. We are the Jewish people. There's been nothing more traumatic than the Holocaust. We love our people, and we're not willing to sacrifice our people for the state of Israel. It's the opposite. But this was his very doctoral degree. 1 month before October 7th, he said Hitler didn't hate the Jews because they were Jews. He hated them because they were laundering money. They were loaning money at extortionate rates. They were thieves. This is what he said a month before October 7th. This is the head of the Palestinian Authority. Well, interestingly, Hamas doesn't have a problem with the Palestinian Authority taking over Gaza. Why? Because the Palestinian Authority once had Gaza. And they were in charge of Gaza when I myself pulled my friends out of their homes in 2005. The Palestinian Authority was in charge of Gaza. And then there were elections because, of course, we want to be democratic. And the people of Gaza were intimidated, and they also saw the corruption of the Palestinian Authority, and they voted for Hamas. So Hamas was now voted into Gaza, and what did they do? They took the heads of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, and you can see this online, unfortunately, and they threw them off the roofs of the buildings and Gaza. So Hamas knows that by putting the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, all they have to do is allow them to be in, wait 2 years, have elections, Hamas will get elected. If they don't get elected, they'll still bring the leaders up to the tops of the buildings and throw them off. And by the way, would you want to be a Palestinian Authority leader in Gaza? And if you were, who would you be the first one to cut a deal with? The people who are going to throw you off the top of the building. So Hamas already sees the Palestinian Authority as their way back into Gaza. What else are they looking for? Well, they accepted the ceasefire, because that doesn't mean anything. They accept the Israeli withdrawal, of course. They accept humanitarian aid and reconstruction. But what about disarming? Well, even a Saudi Arabian academic today spoke about the hole in this plan that Hamas says that they accept it, but they're not yet willing to disarm. They've refused to give up their weapons, their tunnels, or their military infrastructure. And there is no commitment to stop the resistance. Why? Because if they want to retake power, that is one of the holes in this deal that will enable them to. Put in a weak Palestinian Authority, give us our guns, we'll threaten the Palestinian Authority, and Gaza will be ours again. And lastly, there is this idea of a technocratic government that will operate within national consensus. Now, I don't know, have you ever been to Morocco or Turkey? I've been to Turkey. Have you ever been to Egypt? I've been to Egypt. Have you ever been to Jordan? I've been to Jordan. I've been to Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, and I've been to Gaza. Can you point out for me a single, well-run, honest, non-corrupt, non-violent Muslim government in the world that is being run by technocrats? No. Technocrats in the Muslim world is a term for the slave of a dictator. So of course Hamas is willing to have technocrats run Gaza, because after they throw the Palestinian Authority off the roots, all those technocrats that were trained in Western universities will become the lackeys and the slaves of Hamas. They will become the worker bees of Hamas. So the fact that Hamas accepts the technocrats shows exactly the problem. Well, there's a deal on the table, and as I mentioned, if we didn't care so much about our hostages, we would never accept this deal. But to accept this deal means not only kicking the can down the road, it means leaving terror in Gaza. How do we know? Because Hamas accepts it. Ben-Gurion's last principle, definitive victory. Without a definitive victory over Hamas, they will regroup, they will regrow, they will take over Gaza, and they will carry out further attacks. We must know what this means. President Trump has great will. Prime Minister Netanyahu knows that this is what this means. He knows. He's under enormous pressure. I don't think anybody would want to be in his shoes. He has the hostage families to bring home the hostages. He's got President Trump who's running out of patience. However, we have got to know Ben-Gurion's 3 principles. The last principle, if you do not have unconditional victory over your enemy, then your enemy will regroup and will carry out what he says he's going to do. Burying our heads in the ground will make no difference. So this last point of how in 2125, we are going to look back at October 23rd, 2023, that is yet to be decided. We all have our personal memories. We've seen the heroism arise. We've seen young Israelis push Hamas to the brink. But trust me and trust yourselves. If we finish this without finishing it, and Hamas regroups and they attack again, and we live with this terror entity for decades to come, we won't be thinking about the heroism that happened since October 7th. We won't be thinking about those brave people who gave up their lives. We won't even be thinking about the hostages. We'll be thinking about how we were defeated by Hamas. The last point is in our hands. I want to offer a prayer to Jewish people, to the Israeli fighters on the front lines, to the families who are waiting for their children to come home, and for all of our supporters around the world. May good destroy evil. It takes courage. It takes belief. If we hang on together, if we pray and we act, we don't give in to illusions, and we don't allow another concepcia. This is a monster that we've already shown we can beat on 7 different fronts throughout the Middle East, and we can do the same thing at home. May we remember our great warriors. May their memories, those who have fallen, be for a blessing. And may we meet again next year and even next week and look back at absolute victory with our hostages home. Thank you for watching True East. I'll see you here very soon after the holidays. Chag Sameach and Shana Tova.